When I asked my son Max, "So, when's the wedding?" Lena didn't even blink. She looked me dead in the eye, with that smug little smile of hers, and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Special people. The words slammed into me harder than any slap could. For 3 years I had paid their rent. $500 a month so they wouldn't be evicted from that shabby two-bedroom in Dayton. For 3 years I had bought their furniture, one piece at a time. A sofa, a bed frame, a cheap little dining set from IKEA that I spent half a Saturday putting together while Max and Lena sat watching TV. For 3 years, I had filled their refrigerator when they called me crying about not having enough to eat. And still, I wasn't special. I froze in my own living room, phone in my hand, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. Max wouldn't even look at me. His eyes darted to the floor, the way they used to when he was a boy caught in a lie. My son, my only child, the boy I carried for 9 long months, the boy I stayed up nights with when he was sick, the boy I worked double shifts for so he could have new sneakers in middle school. He couldn't even look me in the eye. And Lena? She floated across the room like she owned it. She kicked her shoes off, curled up on the sofa I bought them, and pulled out her phone like she had better things to do. Meanwhile, I was standing there in shock, with tears burning behind my eyes and my whole body shaking like I had stepped into an ice bath. Upstairs, in my closet, was the pale pink dress I had chosen just for this occasion. I remember the day I bought it. I had stood in front of the mirror at Macy's, twisting side to side, checking how it looked under the fluorescent lights. It wasn't flashy, but it was elegant. Soft pink with a little lace at the sleeves. It made me feel pretty, dignified, like a mother of the groom should look. It cost me $200. That may not sound like much to some people, but to me it was 2 weeks of groceries. I told myself it was worth it, that when I stood in those wedding photos, next to my son, smiling with pride, I'd forget all about the money. Now that dress was nothing but a cruel reminder, hanging useless in the dark of my closet. I thought about the shoes I bought to match. Nude heels, just high enough to look nice, but low enough so I wouldn't trip on the dance floor. I imagined how it would feel to walk into that reception hall, head held high, proud of the man my son had become. But there was no reception for me. No dance floor, no photos, because I wasn't special. That word echoed in my head like church bells after a funeral. Special. What made the others so special? What made me unworthy of being there on the most important day of my son's life? I wanted to scream. To ask Lena what exactly she thought I was for the past 3 years, if not special. Was I not special when I bailed them out after their car broke down and they couldn't get to work? Was I not special when I drove Lena to urgent care when she had the flu and Max couldn't leave his job? Was I not special when I handed over $500 every month without fail, just so they could keep a roof over their heads? But the words wouldn't come. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. I just stood there, shaking, while Lena scrolled her phone on the sofa like nothing had happened. And Max, my Max, just shifted his weight from foot to foot, too much of a coward to defend me. My mind flashed back to when he was a boy, 10 years old, standing in a little league uniform with dirt on his cheeks, grinning at me from across the baseball field. "Did you see that, Mom? Did you see me hit the ball?" he had shouted, pride written all over his face. I saw him then. I always saw him. I was always there. And now, on the biggest day of his life, he chose to pretend I didn't exist. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. And in that moment, I understood something I had never dared to consider before. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from your own flesh and blood. And I wasn't ready for how much that truth would destroy me. People say you can measure love by the sacrifices you're willing to make. If that's true, then I gave my son more love than anyone on this earth. It started small. Back when Max was fresh out of college, struggling to land his first real job. He and Lena were living in a cramped apartment near downtown Dayton, the kind where the paint was peeling off the walls and you could hear every argument from the neighbors. Their fridge broke down that first summer, and I remember Max calling me in a panic. "Mom, the food's spoiling. We don't have the money for repairs." So I drove over with bags of groceries and handed him $200 in cash. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, just a little help until he got on his feet. But one time turned into two. Two turned into a monthly habit. Before long, I was paying their rent. $500 every month, wired straight to the landlord. I told myself it was temporary, just until Max's career stabilized, just until Lena finished her training program. But months stretched into years, and in those years, I learned to go without things for myself. I stopped buying new clothes. I clipped coupons religiously. I took extra shifts at the diner just so I could keep up with their bills on top of my own. I was 52 years old, standing on my feet 10 hours a day, pouring coffee for strangers, just so my son wouldn't have to worry about losing his apartment. Was I tired? Yes, but I told myself it was worth it, because Max was my boy, and Lena was supposed to be like a daughter to me. I remember when they moved into that new place across town. Max called me, excited. "It's bigger, Mom. We'll finally have some space." I drove over with a trunk full of furniture I'd bought secondhand. A dining table, 4 chairs, some lamps. Max laughed and said, "You didn't have to do all this." But Lena didn't laugh. She just looked around, inspecting everything like a queen judging her servants. A week later, I was back at the store, buying them a brand new sofa because Lena said the old one was too uncomfortable. Do you know what it feels like to drag a heavy box up 2 flights of stairs by yourself while your son watches football in the other room? I do. Still, I told myself it was fine, because that's what moms do. Every holiday, I filled their fridge. Thanksgiving turkeys, Christmas hams, Easter baskets, all on me. I wanted them to feel secure, cared for, loved. I wanted Lena to see me as family, not just his mother. But looking back now, I realized something. Lena never once said thank you. She accepted everything I gave like it was her right, like I owed her. And Max, my sweet boy, just let her. There were times I caught glimpses of who he used to be, like the day their car broke down on I-75. Max called me, panicked. "Mom, we can't get to work. Lena's crying. We don't know what to do." I grabbed my purse, drove out to the highway, and paid the tow truck out of my own pocket. Max hugged me that day, whispered, "I don't know what we'd do without you." Those words carried me through so many sleepless nights, because truth be told, I was lonely. After his father passed, Max was all I had. My world revolved around making sure he was okay. Helping him succeed felt like helping myself heal. And so, I gave, and gave, and gave, until giving was all I knew how to do. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. My love became their safety net. My sacrifices became their expectations. And without me even realizing it, they stopped seeing me as a person. I wasn't Mom anymore. I was a wallet, a lifeline, a background character in their story. And the cruelest part? I didn't see it. Not until that day in my living room, when Lena's words cut me open. We only invited special people. Special people. Not the woman who bought their first couch. Not the woman who paid their rent for 3 years. Not the woman who worked herself to the bone to keep them fed. No. In Lena's world, I was never special. I was just useful. And now that the wedding was done, even my usefulness had an expiration date. As I stood there replaying every sacrifice in my mind, I realized something that made my stomach turn. All those years of giving. All those years of scraping by so they wouldn't have to. None of it meant anything to them. Not a damn thing. It's almost funny, looking back now, how convinced I was that Lena and I were building a bond. That all those little gestures, those polite smiles, those half-hearted hugs meant something. I remember the first Thanksgiving after they moved into that new apartment. I showed up with 2 grocery bags full of food, a turkey, stuffing mix, cranberry sauce, even Lena's favorite sweet rolls from Dorothy Lane Market. I spent the entire morning in their kitchen, cooking while Lena sat at the counter sipping wine. She didn't lift a finger, not one. But when we sat down to eat, she smiled at me and said, "This feels like family." My heart swelled at those words. For weeks after, I replayed them in my mind. I told my sister Diana about it over the phone. "She called me family," I said, tears stinging my eyes. I think she really means it. But now I know it was just words. Empty. Convenient. Another time, when Lena was in the hospital for dehydration, Max couldn't get off work. I left my job early, drove to Miami Valley Hospital, and sat by her bed for 6 hours. I brushed her hair back, made sure the nurses brought extra blankets, even fed her ice chips when she asked. She squeezed my hand before she fell asleep and whispered, "You're like a second mom. Second mom." I carried that phrase in my heart like it was gold. For months after, I bragged to my coworkers, to my neighbors, to anyone who would listen. "She calls me her second mom," I'd say with pride. But the truth, I wasn't her second mom. I was her backup plan, her caretaker when it was convenient, her servant when Max wasn't around, even at Christmas, when I spent half my paycheck on gifts. I bought Max the leather jacket he had been eyeing for months, and for Lena, a gold necklace with a tiny heart pendant. I remember how she gasped when she opened it. "Oh, this is beautiful," she said, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she saw me as more than just Max's mom. But 2 weeks later, I saw that same necklace listed on her Poshmark account. She sold my gift for $75. Still, I pushed those feelings down. I told myself I was overthinking, being too sensitive. She's young, I thought. She'll come around. Give her time. I wanted so badly to believe we were a family. I remember one Sunday afternoon. We were all crammed on that sofa I bought them, watching football. Max had his arm around Lena, and I was sitting on the edge, careful not to take up too much space. Lena leaned her head against Max's shoulder and said, "Isn't this nice? Just the three of us." I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. I thought, yes, this is nice. This is what family feels like. But the more I think about it now, the more I realize she was never talking about me. She was talking about her and Max. I was just the third wheel, the extra body in the room. The signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. Like the time they went on vacation to Myrtle Beach. I gave them $300 in spending money because Max swore he didn't want to go if he couldn't treat Lena to something special. They came back sunburned, laughing, full of stories. I asked to see the photos, and Lena scrolled through her phone, showing me sunsets, cocktails, selfies. Not a single photo had me in mind. Not one caption said, "Thanks to Mom, we made this trip happen." And still, I smiled and said, "I'm so glad you had fun." Because in my head, family isn't about keeping score. It's about giving, about being there, about showing love, no matter what. But Lena didn't see it that way. To her, family was transactional. You give when she needs you, and when she doesn't, you're invisible. I think the hardest memory to swallow is Max's birthday 2 years ago. I threw him a surprise party in my backyard. I hung lights, grilled burgers, invited all his old high school friends. Lena showed up late, wearing that smug expression like the world revolved around her. She handed Max a small gift bag, barely kissed him on the cheek, and then spent most of the evening scrolling through her phone. But when the cake came out, Max leaned down, kissed her forehead, and said, "Thanks, babe. This is perfect. Perfect." As if she had done anything. I stood there with frosting on my fingers, the woman who had planned the whole thing, and watched as all the credit went to her. And instead of speaking up, instead of saying, "Hey, I did this for you," I just smiled, because that's what mothers do. We smile through the hurt. I thought I was part of something bigger. I thought all the little sacrifices, all the quiet moments, all the whispered, "You're like a mom," phrases meant I belonged. But I was wrong. Because on the one day that truly mattered, the one day that should have been about family, about love, about unity, I wasn't even worth an invitation. Looking back, the shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in slow, like a draft slipping through a cracked window. You don't notice it at first, but eventually the chill takes over the whole room. It was about a month before what I thought would be the wedding. I had called Max to ask about venues. "Do you need me to help with deposits? Decorations? Anything?" I asked, already picturing myself stringing lights and tying ribbons like I had for his high school dances. There was a pause on the line. Too long. Then Max cleared his throat and said, Lena's handling most of it, Mom." Most of it. That was strange. Because Lena wasn't exactly the planner type. She could spend hours picking out Instagram filters, sure. But planning a whole wedding? That didn't sound like her. Still, I told myself not to worry. Let them do it their way, I thought. My turn is just to show up, smile, and celebrate. But then came the little things. One afternoon, I dropped by their apartment unannounced. I had a bag of groceries, chicken, rice, some fresh vegetables, because Max had mentioned money was tight again. When Lena opened the door, She looked surprised, almost annoyed. "Oh, hi," she said flatly, blocking the doorway with her body like I was a salesman. "I just brought some food," I explained, holding up the bags with a smile. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the apartment looked different. Cleaner than usual, candles burning, music playing softly in the background. On the coffee table I saw a stack of envelopes. Heavy, cream-colored, with shiny gold lettering. Wedding invitations. I froze. "Are those—" I started, pointing toward the table. Before I could finish, Lena swooped in, scooped up the pile, and shoved them into a drawer. "Just bills," she muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Bills. But I know what I saw." I brushed it off at the time, telling myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe they were thank you cards, or something else entirely. But deep down, a pit started forming in my stomach. Then came the conversation at Sunday dinner. Max had come over alone. No Lena this time. He sat at the kitchen table, pushing mashed potatoes around his plate. Quiet. Too quiet. "So," I asked gently, "have you two decided on a date yet? I need to know so I can get time off work." Max's fork clinked against the plate. He didn't look up. "We're still figuring it out. Still figuring it out." The words were empty, rehearsed. I knew my son's tells. The way he avoided my eyes. The way his jaw tightened. He was hiding something. "Max," I pressed, "you'd tell me when it's decided, right? I mean, I'm your mother. I should be there." Finally, he looked up. His eyes softened for just a second, and I saw that little boy again, the one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and say, "For you, Mom." "Of course," he whispered. "Of course you'll be there." But even as he said it, I didn't believe him. After he left that night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the dishes were cleared, staring at the empty chair across from me. My gut twisted, warning me that something was wrong. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I was at the mall, buying a gift for my friend Carol's granddaughter, when I spotted Lena in one of the boutiques. She was with 2 other women I didn't recognize. They were laughing, holding dresses up against their bodies, posing in front of the mirrors. Bridesmaids. I froze in the middle of the store, clutching a bag of children's toys. I wanted to walk over, to hug her, to say, "How exciting! Is this for the wedding?" But before I could move, Lena caught sight of me in the mirror. Her smile faded. She leaned in close to her friends, whispered something, and then steered them all toward the dressing rooms. She didn't wave. She didn't acknowledge me. She acted like I wasn't even there. I stood rooted to the floor, heat rushing to my face, humiliation crawling up my neck. People bustled past with shopping bags, holiday music playing overhead, but I felt invisible. That's when the pit in my stomach hardened into something sharper. Suspicion. Fear. I went home that night and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the pale pink dress hanging in my closet. I reached out and touched the fabric, running my fingers over the lace sleeves. For the first time, instead of feeling excited, I felt stupid, naive. Something was happening, something they weren't telling me. And though I couldn't prove it yet, a small voice inside me whispered the truth I didn't want to face. Maybe I wasn't part of their future at all. There are moments in life that etch themselves into your memory like carvings in stone. For me, it wasn't the day Max was born, or his first steps, or even the day he graduated college. It was the moment Lena smiled at me and told me I wasn't special. It happened in my own living room, a place that had always felt safe, warm, mine. But in that instant, it became a stage for betrayal. I had called Max earlier that day, just a simple Sunday check-in. My voice was light, cheerful, as I asked, "So, when's the wedding?" I was expecting laughter, maybe a little teasing about keeping the date secret too long. What I wasn't expecting was silence. And then, before I could even process, the front door opened. Max walked in, Lena right behind him, like they had rehearsed their entrance. Max wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the carpet. But Lena, she was all confidence. She looked straight at me, her lips curling into that smug little smile that never quite reached her eyes. And with a tone so casual, so calculated, she said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." It was like the air was punched out of my lungs. My grip on the phone loosened, and for a second, I thought it might hit the floor. Special people. I repeated those words in my head, over and over, like maybe they would change meaning if I turned them around enough times. But they didn't. They stayed sharp, cruel, slicing deeper every time they echoed. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse on the floor. Instead, I just stood there, frozen. My son, the boy I raised, the boy I sacrificed for, couldn't even lift his head to look at me. His silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. Meanwhile, Lena made herself at home. She walked over to the sofa I had bought them, kicked off her heels, and sat down like she was the queen of the house. My house, the place I worked so hard to keep, where every stick of furniture had a story, a meaning. And in that moment, with her smirk and her careless words, she stripped me of every illusion I'd been holding on to. Upstairs, hanging neatly in my closet, was the pale pink dress I had chosen for her wedding. I could see it in my mind's eye, the way it shimmered under the department store lights when I tried it on. I had spun in front of the mirror, imagining myself standing proud next to my son, smiling for photos that would last a lifetime. But there would be no photos, no moment, no proud mother in pink. That dress was nothing more than fabric now, mocking me with every dollar I'd spent on it. I felt the tears sting my eyes, hot and unwelcome, but I refused to let them fall in front of her, not in front of Lena. My voice cracked when I finally managed to speak. Married? Yesterday? Lena nodded, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite name. Satisfaction, maybe, or victory. Yes, she said simply, leaning back against the cushions I had paid for. It was beautiful, small, intimate, just special people. Max shifted uncomfortably, still silent, still avoiding my gaze. Special people, I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. And I wasn't. I stopped myself, because I already knew the answer. I wasn't. My chest tightened, and I pressed my palm against the counter to steady myself. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I thought of the $1,000 check sitting in my desk drawer, waiting to be handed over as a wedding gift. Money I had saved by skipping dinners out, by cutting coupons, by working late nights. Money that meant nothing now. I thought of the phone call to my sister Diana in Chicago, my voice trembling with excitement as I told her to book her flight. I pictured her suitcase half-packed, her smile as she imagined us sitting together at the reception, proud aunts and mothers united in joy. And I thought of every sacrifice I had made in the last 3 years. The rent, the groceries, the furniture, the late-night drives, all of it. And still, I wasn't special. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I stared at my son, willing him to speak, to stand up for me, to prove that the boy I raised was still in there somewhere. But he said nothing, and in that nothing, I heard everything. I heard the distance. I heard the betrayal. I heard the choice he had made, not just to exclude me from his wedding, but to let someone else define who I was in his life. Lena smiled again, slow and deliberate, like a knife twisting deeper. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't losing my son to marriage. I had already lost him to her long ago. Special people. The phrase rattled in my chest like loose change in a jar. Over and over again, my mind gnawed at it. Who were these so-called special people? If not me, the woman who carried Max for 9 months, who raised him alone after his father passed, who sacrificed every ounce of herself so he could have a better life, then who? I pictured Lena's side of the family. Her cousin Beth, who never worked a steady job in her life, but always had her nails done. Her uncle Mike, who once bragged about stiffing a waitress on a tip because he didn't believe in rewarding people for doing their job. Were they special? Maybe her best friend Kara, the one who spent more time gossiping about Lena behind her back than being loyal to her face. Was she special enough to stand beside my son while I sat at home in silence? The more I thought about it, the sicker I felt. Special. I pressed my hands against the counter to steady myself. My palms were damp, my legs weak, like all the strength had been drained right out of me. My own house suddenly felt foreign, like I didn't belong there anymore. I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand names, faces, a guest list that would tell me exactly who had been chosen over me. But I couldn't bring myself to give Lena the satisfaction of my curiosity. Still, the question burned inside me, because the truth was, I already knew the answer. Special meant anyone but me. Anyone but the woman who had written check after check, month after month, so her son and his wife wouldn't be homeless. Anyone but the woman who sat in hospital waiting rooms, who answered phone calls at 2 in the morning, who never once said no when they needed help. Anyone but me. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, a bitter mix of rage and heartbreak. I glanced at Max again, silently pleading for him to speak, to break the spell Lena had cast with those two simple words. But he didn't. He just stood there, head down, his hands shoved into his pockets like a scolded teenager. And in his silence, I realized something cruel. Maybe he agreed with her. Maybe in his eyes I wasn't special either. That thought broke me more than Lena's words ever could. Because no matter how old Max got, no matter how many mistakes he made, I had always seen him as special. My one and only. My reason for pushing through long shifts and lonely nights. My anchor when grief threatened to swallow me whole after his father died. And yet, when the moment came to show me that same devotion, that same loyalty, he chose silence. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my eyes burning. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers, but all I could do was stand there, trembling, while Lena leaned back against the sofa cushions I bought and looked perfectly at ease, like she had won. The memory of that pink dress flashed in my mind again, hanging upstairs, still wrapped in the garment bag, the shoes still in their box, tags untouched, the $1,000 check folded neatly in my desk drawer, waiting for a celebration I would never be part of, all of it useless, all of it meaningless. Because when it came time to count the special people, I wasn't even on the list. I thought of my sister Diana, how excited she had been to fly in from Chicago, how she had rearranged her schedule, set aside money for a ticket, already started picking out what dress she'd wear. What would I tell her now? That the wedding had happened, and neither of us mattered enough to witness it? The humiliation cut deeper than the betrayal. It wasn't just that I had been excluded. It was the fact that my exclusion had been deliberate, calculated, announced with a smile designed to twist the knife. I stared at Lena, trying to understand what kind of person could look a mother in the eye and deliver news like that with such smug satisfaction. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she wanted me to hurt. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized Lena had been drawing the lines for a long time. Family on one side, me on the other. I just hadn't noticed until it was too late. The room felt smaller with every breath I took, the walls closing in, my son shrinking into the background, Lena glowing in the spotlight. And me? I was the outsider, the stranger in my own home. And as much as I wanted to believe this was all Lena's doing, I couldn't escape the truth staring me in the face. Max had let it happen. That night, after Lena's smile and Max's silence shattered me, I went upstairs. My legs felt heavy with every step, like I was dragging chains behind me. I wasn't even sure why I climbed those stairs, but somehow, I knew where my feet were leading me, to my closet. I opened the door slowly, and there it was, still hanging in the garment bag, untouched, perfect, the pale pink dress. I had picked it out with so much care. I can still see myself standing in front of the mirror at Macy's, smoothing the fabric over my hips, checking how it looked under the lights. I had spun in a slow circle, imagining how the skirt would move when I walked down the aisle behind my son, or posed for pictures with the bride. The saleswoman had smiled at me and said, "That color's beautiful on you. Soft, but elegant." And I had believed her. $200. I put it on my credit card that day, promising myself I'd pay it off before the wedding, promising myself it would all be worth it. Now, staring at it, all I felt was foolish. I ran my fingers along the lace sleeves, tracing the delicate pattern, and it almost hurt to touch, like every thread carried a broken promise. On the shelf below sat the shoes I'd bought to match. Nude heels, low enough so I wouldn't trip, but classy enough for photos. Still in their box, tags dangling. I had imagined wearing them as I danced at the reception, maybe even spinning once or twice with Max, like we used to when he was little, and I'd lift him up and twirl him around the kitchen. But there would be no dance, no photos, just empty fabric, unworn shoes, and a mother's shattered heart. And then there was the envelope. I walked over to my dresser, opened the top drawer, and pulled out the check I'd been saving for months. $1,000. I had folded it neatly, tucked it into an envelope, and written for Max and Lena on the front in my best handwriting. Do you know what it feels like to save that kind of money when you're living paycheck to paycheck? To skip dinners out, to cut coupons, to turn down invitations from friends because you're trying to build something for someone else? It felt like hope, like sacrifice, like love. And now it felt like a punchline to a cruel joke. I sat down on the edge of my bed, dress hanging in front of me, shoes at my feet, envelope in my lap. And for the first time that day, the tears came. Hot, heavy, unstoppable. I cried for the money wasted. I cried for the dreams dashed. But more than anything, I cried for the realization that I had poured my heart, my energy, my very soul into a future I wasn't even invited to witness. I thought about the conversations I'd had with Diana in Chicago, how I'd told her to book her flight, how we'd planned to sit together at the reception, laughing and taking photos, celebrating the boy we both loved. I pictured her opening her suitcase, laying out dresses on her bed, excited to show up for her nephew. And now I'd have to call her and say, "Don't bother. It already happened. Without us." The humiliation made my stomach churn. I wanted to rip the dress to shreds, to burn the shoes, to tear the check into pieces and throw it all away. But I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move, because as much as it all hurt, those things weren't just fabric and paper and leather. They were symbols of the mother I had been, of the hope I had carried, of the love I had given, and I wasn't ready to let go of them yet. So instead, I zipped the garment bag back up. I slid the shoes back onto the shelf. I tucked the envelope back into the drawer, and I sat there staring into the closet, wondering how long those reminders would haunt me. Would I ever be able to look at that dress without feeling like a fool? Would the shoes ever see the light of day? Would the envelope ever find a purpose? Or would it just sit there, gathering dust, like the pieces of my broken heart? I pressed my face into my hands and sobbed until my chest hurt, because the truth hit me harder than anything Lena could have said. I wasn't just excluded from the wedding. I had been excluded from my son's life, and the dress hanging in my closet was proof. It took me 2 days to pick up the phone. 2 days of pacing the house, of staring at the dress in my closet and the check in my drawer. 2 days of rehearsing what I would say, of dreading the sound of my sister's voice on the other end. Diana had been so excited. From the moment I told her about Max and Lena's engagement, she'd been counting down. She booked her flight early, told everyone at work she'd be out for a few days, even bragged to her friends that her nephew was getting married and she was going to be front and center. How could I tell her she wasn't even considered? That neither of us mattered. Finally, on the third morning, I sat at my kitchen table, phone in my hand, heart pounding. I dialed her number, and when she answered with her usual, "Hey, sis," my throat tightened so badly I could barely breathe. "Diana," I managed to whisper. Something in my voice must have tipped her off. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. I swallowed hard. "It's about Max, and the wedding." There was a pause. "Oh, don't tell me they're postponing. I've already got my ticket, and they already got married," I blurted out. My words cracked like glass. Silence. Long, suffocating silence. "What do you mean, already got married?" Diana's voice sharpened. "Yesterday," I said, tears filling my eyes. "They had a ceremony. Small. Private. I wasn't invited. You weren't invited. Nobody from our side was invited." Her gasp cut through me like a blade. "Are you serious? You're his mother. How could he—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "And Lena? Was this her doing?" I pressed my hand against my forehead, shaking. She looked me straight in the eye, Diana. She said, "We only invited special people." There it was again, the phrase that haunted me, dripping with venom. Diana's outrage exploded through the phone. "Special people? Special people? You've been paying their rent, buying their furniture, feeding them like they were your children, and she has the nerve to say you're not special? Oh, hell no." I couldn't speak. My tears slid silently down my cheeks as Diana ranted. "I knew it," she went on, her voice sharp. "I knew that girl had something nasty in her. From the first time I met her, she looked at you like you were beneath her. I tried to tell you, but you said, 'Oh, she's just shy, she'll warm up.' Warm up? She's ice cold." "Don't," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Don't say that. Because if you're right, then what does that make Max? He let it happen. He stood there. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. The line was quiet for a moment. When Diana spoke again, her voice was softer, full of sorrow. It makes him a coward, sis. And that's the hardest thing. Not her. Him. Her words hit me harder than Lena's smile ever could. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I had been so quick to blame Lena for everything. Her arrogance, her entitlement, her cruelty. But Max wasn't some child anymore. He was a grown man. My grown son. And he had chosen silence. Diana must have heard my sobs because her tone shifted again. Listen to me, she said firmly. You did everything for him. You raised him alone. You gave him everything you had, and more. If he can't see that, if he can't honor that, then that's on him, not you. I don't know who he is anymore, I admitted, my voice shaking. I looked at him that day, and it was like staring at a stranger. My baby boy, the one who used to bring me flowers from the yard, gone. And in his place, a man who couldn't even call his mother special. Diana sighed heavily. Maybe he's not gone. Maybe he's buried under her control. But that doesn't change what he did to you. And it doesn't change the fact that you are special. Don't you ever let her take that truth away from you. Her words were kind, but they couldn't patch the hole in my chest, because no matter how much my sister reassured me, the reality remained. My son had crossed a line, and there was no going back. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just the sound of us breathing on opposite ends of the line, hundreds of miles apart, but bound by the same wound. Finally, Diana broke the silence. Do you want me to cancel my flight? The question twisted the knife deeper. Yes, I whispered. There's nothing to come for. The wedding already happened. Without us. Her sharp intake of breath told me she was holding back tears of her own. I'm so sorry, sis. So sorry. I closed my eyes, clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Me too. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at nothing. The weight of shame pressed down on me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was having to confess it, to say the words out loud, to admit to my own sister that I wasn't worthy in my son's eyes. And for the first time, I realized the truth. The hardest part of betrayal isn't just the moment it happens. It's the retelling. The humiliation of saying out loud that the person you loved most chose to cut you out. And now, that humiliation was mine to carry. The envelope sat in my top drawer like a ghost. Every time I opened it to grab a pair of socks or a folded t-shirt, there it was, staring back at me, taunting me. $1,000. For some people that amount might not mean much. A weekend getaway. A shiny new gadget. But for me, it meant months of careful saving. Skipping dinners out. Cutting coupons like a religion. Telling myself no, over and over again, so I could say yes to Max on his big day. It wasn't just money. It was a promise. A blessing. My way of saying, I'm proud of you. I believe in you. I'm with you. And now, it was nothing but paper. Paper that no one would ever see. I pulled it out of the drawer one night, days after the truth had come crashing down. The envelope was still crisp, my handwriting neat across the front, for Max and Lena. I had even doodled a little heart next to their names, like some lovesick teenager. My fingers trembled as I held it. I thought about the day I wrote that check. It was late at night, after a long shift at the diner. My feet ached, my back screamed, but I sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook open, smiling. I remember whispering to myself, this will make them so happy. They'll know how much I support them. I imagined the look on Max's face when I handed it to him, the way his eyes would light up, the way he'd hug me tight, whispering, thanks, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you. I imagined Lena, too. Maybe she'd finally soften toward me. Maybe she'd look at me with genuine gratitude. Maybe even call me Mom for the first time. Maybe that check would be more than just money. Maybe it would buy me a place in her heart. But those were just fantasies. The reality was an envelope that would never be opened, a gift that would never be given. I pressed the check against my chest, and the tears came again, because it wasn't just about the money. It was about everything it represented. All the nights I stayed up worrying about Max. All the mornings I woke up early to work extra hours, just so he could have more than I ever did. All the times I told myself it was worth it, that one day he'd look back and see just how much I had sacrificed. That check was proof of my love. And now, it was proof of my foolishness. I thought about tearing it up right then and there, just ripping it into tiny pieces, watching it fall like confetti into the trash, a final act of closure, but my hands wouldn't do it. Because some part of me still clung to the hope, foolish as it was, that one day Max might come back, that he might knock on my door, his eyes full of regret, and say, "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong." And maybe then I could hand him that envelope and let it mean what it was supposed to mean all along. But another part of me, the wounded part, the bitter part, wanted to keep it as evidence, a receipt of everything I gave and everything I was denied, a physical reminder that I had been ready to give even more, and still, I was shut out. I set the envelope on the table and just stared at it. The weight of it felt heavier than any stack of bills I'd ever paid, because at least with bills, you get something in return. Electricity, heat, a roof over your head. But this was an offering into a void, a gift with no recipient, a love letter that would never be read. I thought of Diana again. If she knew about the check, she'd tell me to cash it back, to spend it on myself for once. She'd tell me, "Sis, buy that new couch you've been eyeing. Take a trip. Do something for you." But the truth? I didn't know how to do that anymore. My whole life had been about giving. Giving to Max. Giving to Lena. Giving until there was nothing left of me. And now, with that envelope in my hands, I realized I didn't even know what it meant to give to myself. The tears blurred my vision as I whispered into the empty room. "This was supposed to be for you, Max. For your future. For your happiness. And you didn't even want me there to give it." I slid the envelope back into the drawer and shut it firmly, as if closing it away could also close off the ache in my chest. But it didn't. Because the gift I never gave wasn't just the money. It was my presence, my love, my blessing. And now, those things would sit in the dark, gathering dust, just like that envelope. I had always been the quiet type, the peacekeeper, the one who swallowed hurt and smiled anyway. But that night, sitting alone with the check in my drawer, and the dress still hanging upstairs, something inside me snapped. I couldn't carry the silence anymore. So I called Max. My voice was steadier than I felt when I said, "Come over, both of you, tonight. We need to talk." There was hesitation on the line. I could hear Lena's muffled voice in the background, sharp and clipped. But Max finally muttered, "Okay, Mom, we'll come by." I hung up before I could change my mind. An hour later, I heard their car pull into the driveway. My stomach twisted, but I stayed seated at the kitchen table, hands clasped tightly in front of me. That table had been the heart of our home for decades. Birthday cakes, Thanksgiving dinners, homework assignments, late-night talks. Everything had happened around it. And now, it was about to hold something entirely different. The door creaked open. Max stepped in first, Lena trailing behind him. She looked bored already, scrolling on her phone as if the whole thing was a waste of her time. "Sit," I said, my voice sharper than even I expected. They slid into chairs across from me. Max looked anywhere but my face. Lena, though, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with challenge. I took a deep breath. "Why?" Max shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, why wasn't I invited?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Why wasn't I there to see my own son get married? Max's lips parted, but no words came out. And then Lena spoke. Her tone was calm, almost amused. "We wanted something small, intimate, just people who really understand us." Her words dripped like poison into the room. "Understand you?" I repeated, my hands tightening around each other. "I've been there for every struggle, every setback. Who do you think kept the roof over your heads when you couldn't pay rent? Who bought that couch you're sitting on? Who drove you to the ER when you were sick, Lena?" Her smirk didn't falter. "We appreciated that, but a wedding is about more than transactions." Transactions. The word sliced through me. All those nights working double shifts, clipping coupons, handing over money I barely had, reduced to transactions. My breath came faster, my chest burning. "You looked me in the eye and said you invited special people. Was I not special enough after everything I've done?" Max flinched at my tone, but Lena only leaned closer. "It's not about what you've done. It's about what you represent." I blinked, stunned. "And what exactly do I represent?" Her lips curved into that same cold smile. "Control, guilt, obligation. We wanted a day free from all that, a day about us. I felt my stomach drop. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the table to keep them steady. I turned to Max, desperate. Is that how you feel too? Do you see me that way? His jaw clenched. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke me all over again. Shame, guilt, but not defiance, not protection. He said nothing. The silence between us roared louder than Lena's words. I leaned back, my body trembling, my voice low. I was ready to give you everything, Max. I saved up $1,000 to hand you on your wedding day. I bought a dress, shoes. I told my sister to fly in from Chicago because I wanted her to share this joy with me. And you let me stand here, blindsided, humiliated, while your wife told me I wasn't special. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them away. Lena's smirk faded for the first time. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was annoyance. But she stayed quiet. Max shifted in his chair, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, I didn't know how to tell you. I let out a bitter laugh. You didn't know how to tell me? You didn't know how to tell your own mother that she wouldn't be at your wedding? Max, you didn't even try. He lowered his head, and the silence stretched. For the first time, I felt anger rising above the sorrow. It wasn't just about being left out. It was about being erased. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. My voice shook, but it was firm. You wanted a day free of me? Congratulations. You got it. But don't come back here expecting me to keep filling your fridge, paying your bills, or buying your furniture. Those days are over. Lena's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time she didn't look so smug. Max finally looked up, panic flickering in his eyes. Mom, wait. But I cut him off. No, Max. You made your choice. You picked your special people, and I wasn't one of them. The kitchen fell silent. My words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. For the first time in years, I felt something other than exhaustion. I felt power. People think betrayal comes in the form of harsh words, slammed doors, or ugly arguments. But that night, sitting at my kitchen table, I learned the truth. Betrayal can be silent. Max's silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I kept waiting for him to speak, to push back against Lena's cold remarks, to stand up, even just a little, for the woman who had given him everything. But he didn't. He sat there with his head down, shoulders rounded, eyes fixed on the floor. It was like watching a ghost of my son. I remembered the boy who used to talk my ear off about superheroes, who would stand on the porch practicing speeches for school, who once told me at 10 years old, Mom, don't worry. I'll always take care of you. That boy was gone. In his place sat a man who couldn't even muster the courage to call his mother special. Lena's words stung, but Max's silence hollowed me out, because silence isn't neutral. Silence takes sides. And that night, his silence told me everything I needed to know. When forced to choose between me and her, he chose her. I stared at him across the table, willing him to meet my eyes. Max, I said softly, my voice trembling, do you agree with her? Do you really think I don't belong in your life anymore? He flinched, his jaw tightening, but he didn't answer. The silence spread like a poison, filling every corner of the room, seeping into my bones. Say something, I begged, my tears spilling now. Anything. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you wanted me there. Tell me you fought for me. But he said nothing, and that nothing hurt worse than if he had shouted in my face, because at least anger means you care. Silence means you've already let go. I thought of all the times I had spoken up for him when he was too shy. At parent-teacher conferences, when teachers criticized his grades, I had been his defender. At Little League games, when he struck out and wanted to quit, I had cheered the loudest, telling him not to give up. At his high school graduation, when he was nervous about his speech, I had whispered, You've got this, honey. Just speak from your heart. Now, when I needed him to speak from his heart, he had nothing to give me. I leaned back in my chair, my chest aching. I looked at Lena, still smirking, clearly satisfied with the power she held. But it wasn't her words that broke me. It was Max's silence that confirmed them. I realized in that moment that silence is not just absence. Silence is permission. By saying nothing, Max allowed Lena's cruelty to stand. By saying nothing, he erased me from his wedding, from his marriage, from his future. I wiped my tears with trembling hands, my voice low. You don't even realize what you've lost, Max. You think you gained a wife, but you lost your mother. And one day, when you look for me, when you finally open your mouth to speak, you may find I have nothing left to say. He finally looked up then, his eyes red, his lips parting as if to form words, but still, nothing came out, just silence. And in that silence, something inside me cracked. For years, I had carried the weight of his needs, his struggles, his happiness. I had filled his fridge, paid his rent, driven him places, bought him clothes, covered his emergencies. But in this moment, with Lena watching like a cat toying with its prey, I saw the truth. My son would never carry the weight of me. The realization was brutal, like ice water poured straight into my veins. I pushed back from the table, standing tall even though my knees trembled. I won't beg for love, Max. I won't beg for a place in your life. If you can't find your voice to defend me now, then maybe you never will. He looked stricken, but still, the silence stretched. I turned toward Lena, my gaze sharp. And you, enjoy your victory, because you've managed to silence the one person who should have shouted for me. Her smile flickered, just for a second, but I didn't wait for her to recover. I walked to the sink, gripped the counter, and steadied my breath. Behind me, chairs scraped, but no one followed. The sound of the door closing was quiet, almost polite, and in that quiet, I heard the end of something I thought could never break, a mother's bond. People like to say hindsight is 20/20, and they're right. Because sitting alone in my kitchen after Max and Lena left, I started piecing together all the little signs I had ignored. The clues that had been there all along, telling me exactly who Lena was. The truth was, she had never respected me. Not once. I thought back to the very first time I met her. Max had brought her over for Sunday dinner. She walked in wearing a designer purse that I knew cost more than my paycheck, even though Max had told me she was between jobs. She barely greeted me before scrolling through her phone at the table, sighing when I asked her about her family, giving one-word answers like every question was an inconvenience. But I brushed it off. I told myself she was nervous, shy, trying to make a good impression. I wanted so badly to believe she would warm up to me, except she never did. When I gave them groceries, Max would at least say thank you. Lena? She'd glance inside the bags, wrinkle her nose, and say things like, "Oh, we don't really eat generic brands." Or, "Could you get almond milk next time instead of regular?" I should have seen it then. Gratitude was never in her vocabulary. Even holidays were the same. One Christmas, I spent hours picking out gifts I thought she'd love. A soft blanket, a gift card to her favorite coffee shop, a necklace that reminded me of her. She opened each one with a tight smile, muttered thanks, and then moved on like I had handed her a pack of gum. But when her friend Kara gave her a pair of earrings, cheap little things from the clearance rack, she squealed like it was the crown jewels. She hugged Kara tight, posed for selfies, bragged about how thoughtful she was. Thoughtful. That word stung, because in all the years I had known Lena, I had never once been called thoughtful by her. Then there were the subtle digs, the way she rolled her eyes when I gave Max advice, the way she interrupted me when I tried to share stories from his childhood, the way she'd sigh loudly whenever I stayed too long at their apartment, making it clear I was overstaying my welcome. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it, that I was sensitive, that I was reading too much into it. But now I knew better. Lena had been drawing lines from day one, lines between us and her, between special and not special. And I had been standing on the wrong side all along. What cut deepest wasn't just her attitude. It was how Max let it slide. Because love makes you blind. I get that. I've seen men turn their backs on their families for women before. But Max wasn't supposed to be that man. Not my Max. And yet, every time Lena dismissed me, Max stayed quiet. Every time she rolled her eyes or smirked behind my back, he pretended not to notice. Maybe he thought keeping the peace was easier. Maybe he told himself it wasn't a big deal. But the truth? Every silence was a choice. Every time he let her disrespect me without saying a word, he was choosing her over me. And Lena knew it. That was the real truth about Lena. She thrived on control. She needed to know she was in charge, that Max belonged to her fully, with no strings pulling him back to his mother. So she cut those strings. one by one. She started with the small things: disapproving looks when he called me, sighs when I dropped by, rolling her eyes when I offered help. Then she escalated, planning trips I wasn't invited on, organizing dinners I only heard about after the fact, keeping me out of conversations about their future. And finally, the wedding, the ultimate severing of ties, a public declaration that I wasn't part of their life, that she had replaced me, erased me, and written herself as the only woman Max needed. It was cruel, calculated, deliberate, and it worked, because when the moment came, my son didn't defend me. He didn't pull me into the circle. He let her word stand. We only invited special people. The truth about Lena is that she never wanted me in their world. And the truth about Max is that he let her win. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the walls I had painted myself, the curtains I had sewn by hand, the photographs of Max smiling as a child. It all felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I whispered into the empty room. She took you from me, Max. But you let her. And that was the truth I couldn't unsee. There are heartbreaks in life that scab over with time. The end of a relationship, the loss of a job, even the death of a loved one, as crushing as it is, eventually softens into memories and quiet grief. But the wound my son gave me, that one refuses to close. It festers. Every morning I wake up with it fresh in my chest, like a bruise that never fades. I make my coffee. I sit at my kitchen table. And no matter what else I try to focus on, the bills, the laundry, the weather outside my window, the wound throbs underneath it all. I never thought Max would be the one to break me. I could have handled Lena's cruelty alone. Her smug smiles, her coldness, even her hateful words. I could have brushed them off as immaturity, as insecurity, as selfishness. But what I can't handle is that my son let her words stand. He let her call me unworthy. He let her declare me not special. And worse, he didn't fight for me to be there on the most important day of his life. That is a wound deeper than anything I've ever known. It's not just about the wedding. It's about what it represents. The rewriting of my role in his life, from mother to outsider, from anchor to afterthought. And once that truth is spoken, once it's lived, there's no undoing it. No apology that can erase it. No hug that can make me forget what it felt like to stand in my own living room and be told I wasn't worthy of my son's future. I've survived a lot of pain in my life, losing my husband, working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, nights of loneliness so deep I thought I might drown in them. But this wound is different, because it was inflicted not by fate, not by tragedy, but by choice. My son's choice. And that kind of wound, it doesn't heal. It changes you. I look at other mothers now with a pang in my chest. At the grocery store, when I see a young man shopping with his mom, laughing with her as they pick out cereal, I want to cry. At church, when I see families lined up in pews, sons with arms around their mothers, I have to look away, because all I can think is, that should have been me. That used to be me. I replay memories in my head like an old film reel. Max running into my arms after his first day of school, tears on his cheeks because he was scared, and me whispering, "You're safe now, honey." Max at 12, proudly handing me a Mother's Day card he made by hand, messy with glue and glitter, the words crooked but full of love. Best mom ever. Max at 17, sitting on the porch with me after his dad's funeral, saying, "It's just us now, Mom. I'll always be here." Those moments feel like they belong to another lifetime, another version of him, another version of me. And the wound deepens every time I remember them, because I realize that the boy who made those promises doesn't exist anymore. In his place is a man who let his wife erase me from his life. People tell me time heals all wounds. But what do you do when time only reminds you of the knife? When every day that passes is another reminder that the person you loved most chose not to love you back in the way you needed? I don't have the answer. All I know is that the ache lingers. It lives under my skin, in my bones, in the quiet moments when I'm alone. Sometimes I catch myself talking to him out loud, even though he's not there. "Why, Max? Why couldn't you stand up for me? Why wasn't I special to you?" My voice echoes in the empty kitchen, and the silence that answers me is heavier than stone. The wound throbs. The wound stays open, because betrayal from a stranger hurts. But betrayal from your own blood? That's a wound a mother can't heal. Grief is heavy, but carrying grief and anger together, that's unbearable. For weeks after the confrontation at my kitchen table, I tried to go back to my routines. Work at the diner, grocery shopping, folding laundry, sitting in front of the TV at night, but nothing felt the same. Every little thing reminded me of them. The smell of coffee brewing in the morning reminded me of all the times I filled Lena's pantry when she claimed they couldn't afford groceries. The jingling of my keys reminded me of every late-night drive across town to rescue them when their car broke down. Even the ache in my back after a long shift reminded me of the rent I paid month after month so they wouldn't feel that same burden. But then I'd hear her words again, echoing in my skull like a cruel chant. We only invited special people. I'd grip the counter, trying to steady myself as the rage bubbled up. How dare she? How dare they? At first, I thought maybe I could forgive Max. Maybe I could convince myself he was under Lena's influence. Too weak to speak, too scared to stand up for me. But the more I replayed that night, the more I realized silence is a choice, and he chose her. That realization hit me hardest one Saturday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the check still tucked in my drawer, unopened. My phone buzzed. A text from Max. Hey, Mom, can you help us with rent again this month? Things are tight. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my throat dry. The audacity. After everything, after excluding me, humiliating me, erasing me, he still had the nerve to ask for help. My hands shook as I typed back, then deleted, then typed again. Finally, I just set the phone down and walked away. That was my breaking point, because I realized if I said yes again, if I kept paying, kept feeding, kept sacrificing, I was teaching them that my love had no limits, that no matter how cruelly they treated me, I would always crawl back, wallet open, heart bleeding, and I couldn't do it anymore. That night, I pulled the envelope from my drawer one last time. I stared at the neat handwriting on the front. For Max and Lena, my own optimism mocking me. My hope turned into a scar. I ripped the envelope in half. The sound was louder than I expected, sharp and final. Then I ripped it again, and again, until the check was nothing but confetti scattered across the floor. I fell to my knees, gathering the torn pieces in my hands, sobbing like I hadn't sobbed since the day I buried Max's father, because it wasn't just paper I was tearing. It was the last illusion that my sacrifices meant something. When the tears finally slowed, I stood, wiped my face, and whispered into the empty room. No more. No more paying their rent. No more filling their fridge. No more saving them from themselves. If they didn't see me as special, then they didn't deserve my sacrifices. It wasn't easy. The guilt clung to me like a second skin. I had been a mother for so long that cutting off the instinct to give felt like cutting off my own arm. But I knew if I didn't stop, I'd lose myself completely. So the next time Max texted, I didn't reply. When he called 2 days later, I let it go to voicemail. His message was short, awkward. Hey, Mom. Just wondering if you got my text. Things are kinda rough right now. I sat at my table, listening to his voice fade, tears in my eyes, but I didn't pick up. That was the hardest part of all. Because even after everything, even after the betrayal, I still loved him. He was still my boy, my only child. But love without respect? Love without reciprocity? That's not love. That's servitude. And I refused to be a servant anymore. That was my breaking point. The moment I chose myself, even if it meant losing him. For weeks after I tore up that check, my house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. At first I hated it. I hated the empty phone that no longer buzzed with Max's texts asking for money. I hated the stillness of my weekends, when I used to run errands for them or stop by with groceries. I hated sitting at my kitchen table without the weight of their problems pulling me down. But slowly, that silence became something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't scrambling to cover someone else's bills. I wasn't dragging furniture up staircases or juggling my schedule to fix their emergencies. For the first time in years, I had space to breathe. And in that quiet, I started to hear something I hadn't heard in a long time. My own voice. I thought about Lena's words again. The ones that haunted me for so long. We only invited special people. At first, those words cut me open. They made me feel worthless. disposable, invisible. But as the days passed, I realized something. Being special isn't about who gets an invitation to a wedding. It isn't about whether your photo ends up in someone else's album. It isn't about how much you sacrifice to earn a spot in someone else's life. Being special is about knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. I had spent years bending over backwards, pouring everything I had into Max and Lena, believing that love was measured by sacrifice, that the more I gave, the more I'd be valued. But I was wrong. Love isn't proven by how much of yourself you're willing to lose. Love is proven when the people you give to pour back into you, when they honor you, respect you, choose you. And my son didn't choose me. That's the truth I had to face, as bitter as it is. But facing it gave me clarity. I will always love Max. That will never change. He is my child, my blood, the boy I raised with every ounce of strength I had. But love does not mean allowing yourself to be disrespected. Love does not mean staying silent when you are erased. So I chose something I should have chosen a long time ago. I chose myself. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day Max will wake up, look at Lena, and realize what he lost when he let her draw those lines. Maybe he'll call me. Maybe he'll apologize. Maybe he'll finally speak. Or maybe he never will. But either way, I've learned my lesson. I am special. Not because Lena says so. Not because Max remembers it. Not because anyone else decides it. I am special because I've lived a life of sacrifice, of love, of resilience. Because I kept going when the world tried to break me. Because I gave my all to a son who may never understand what that meant. And I survived when he turned away. And maybe that's the cruelest, truest part of this story. Sometimes the people you love most won't see your worth until it's too late. So here's what I'll say to anyone listening. Don't wait for someone else to validate your value. Don't pour yourself empty hoping one day they'll look at you and finally say you're special. See it in yourself first. Because if you don't, you might end up like me, standing in your own kitchen, holding a phone like it weighs 1,000 pounds, realizing too late that silence speaks louder than words. But if you do see it, if you claim it, then no one can take it from you. Not a cruel daughter-in-law. Not even a son you love more than life itself. I will carry this wound forever. I know that. But I will also carry the lesson it taught me. Never beg to be special in someone else's story. Write your own.